Hello, my beautiful Taurus. I'm truly grateful that you're here today. I hope you found a quiet moment just for yourself, because this reading feels less like trying to predict the future and more like sitting beside someone who gently reminds you how far you've already come. If something resonates with your heart, hold on to it. If something doesn't, that's perfectly okay too. Let's simply see where these cards want to lead us today. The very first feeling that comes through is surprisingly peaceful. Not because everything around you has suddenly become perfect, but because something inside you seems to be getting tired of carrying what no longer belongs there. Taurus, it feels like you've been standing at the edge of a chapter that has quietly been closing for much longer than you realized. There wasn't a dramatic ending. There wasn't one defining moment that changed everything overnight. Instead, life seems to have been whispering to you little by little, encouraging you to loosen your grip on people, expectations, and old versions of yourself that simply don't fit anymore. The Death card appears almost immediately, and its presence feels incredibly gentle. Rather than announcing an ending with fear, it sits beside you like an old friend saying, "You've carried this long enough." Perhaps you've been trying to keep something alive simply because it once meant everything to you. Maybe it was a relationship, a dream, a routine, or even the image of who you thought you needed to become. Yet lately, something inside your heart has started asking a different question. Not, "How do I fix this?" but, "What happens if I finally let it go?" Yeah? That's a very different question, isn't it? Because letting go doesn't always feel like giving up. Sometimes it feels like finally breathing after holding your breath for far too long. As the Six of Swords comes forward, the energy begins to soften even more. It feels as though your soul already knows the direction it's moving, even if your mind is still searching for certainty. You may notice yourself reacting differently to situations that once overwhelmed you. Conversations that used to consume your thoughts now seem quieter. Certain worries don't carry the same weight they once did. It isn't because you've stopped caring. It's because you're slowly discovering that peace can be a choice, even before every answer arrives. Okay, that realization can feel unfamiliar at first, especially for someone who has always valued stability. Taurus often wants solid ground before taking another step, but these cards seem to suggest that your heart is learning to trust something deeper than certainty. It may be learning to trust itself. The Four of Swords brings an almost sacred silence into this reading. There's a feeling that your spirit has been asking for rest, not because you're weak, but because you've been growing beneath the surface. Growth isn't always loud. Healing isn't always visible. Some of the most important transformations happen in moments when nothing appears to be changing at all. Perhaps you've worried that you've been standing still. Perhaps you've questioned whether life has forgotten you. Oh my God. These cards almost smile at that thought, because they don't see someone who has been forgotten. They see someone preparing. There are seasons when life asks us to move. There are other seasons when life quietly rebuilds us from the inside out. This feels much more like the second. Then, the Hermit gently steps into the story, and somehow, everything becomes even quieter. Not lonely, just quiet enough for your own voice to become clear again. It feels like you're beginning to recognize which opinions truly matter and which ones you've been carrying simply because they've been around for so long. There is a calm wisdom growing inside you, not the kind that needs to prove itself, but the kind that naturally changes the way you walk through life. Perhaps that's why certain people have started feeling more distant. Perhaps certain places don't feel quite the same anymore. You're not necessarily losing them. You may simply be growing beyond the version of yourself that once needed them in exactly the same way. And that's okay. Not every ending arrives to take something away. Some endings quietly make room for a life that finally feels like your own. As these cards settle on the table together, there's a peaceful feeling surrounding your energy. It doesn't promise that every challenge disappears tomorrow. It simply suggests that your heart may already be moving towards something lighter than what you've been carrying. The hardest part may not be walking into a new chapter. The hardest part may have been believing you deserved one in the first place. The cards seem to hint that this quiet transformation is only the beginning, because what's waiting just ahead doesn't begin with what you're leaving behind. It begins with discovering someone you've slowly been becoming all along. Something feels beautifully different here, Taurus. It isn't loud enough for everyone else to notice, but it may be changing the way you look at yourself every single day. There was a time when someone else's approval could completely shape your mood. A kind word lifted you. A disappointing moment stayed with you much longer than you wanted it to. Lately, though, it feels like you're beginning to measure your worth by something much quieter, something much more real. The Strength card appears, and the energy around it doesn't feel dramatic at all. It feels calm. It feels steady. It feels like someone who no longer needs to prove how strong they are because they've already survived things that no one else fully understands. Sometimes the strongest version of you isn't the one that fights the hardest. Sometimes it's the version that knows when to stop chasing, when to stop explaining, and when to simply walk away with kindness still living in your heart. There may have been moments when you questioned yourself because other people couldn't see your intentions. Perhaps you tried to be understood. Perhaps you hoped that if you gave a little more, loved a little harder, or waited a little longer, someone would finally recognize everything you had been carrying. Yet these cards seem to whisper that your journey was never really about convincing anyone else. It may have always been about remembering that your value existed long before anyone noticed it. The Queen of Pentacles settles into the reading so naturally that it almost feels like she's been waiting for you. Her presence carries the feeling of someone who has learned that peace is built slowly, one decision at a time. Taurus, you may find yourself becoming much more protective of your energy these days. You're choosing conversations that leave your heart feeling lighter. You're becoming more careful about where your time goes. Even your dreams may be changing, not because you've given up on the old ones, but because you've discovered that the life you truly want feels much simpler than the one you once imagined. Yeah, simplicity can be surprisingly powerful. It feels like you're beginning to appreciate things that don't need to impress anyone. A quiet morning, a peaceful home, genuine laughter with someone who accepts you exactly as you are, financial stability that grows little by little. Relationships that don't leave you questioning where you stand. These aren't small blessings. For you, they may be becoming the very definition of success. The Nine of Pentacles arrives with an incredibly reassuring feeling. There is something about this card that seems to celebrate everything you've been building behind the scenes. Even if progress has felt slow, it doesn't appear to have been wasted. Every difficult conversation, every disappointment, every lonely evening may have quietly shaped the person you're becoming today. Looking back, you might realize that some doors needed to close because they were never leading where your soul truly wanted to go. Oh my God, isn't it interesting how life sometimes answers our prayers in ways we don't recognize until much later? Perhaps there were moments when you thought life was taking something away from you. These cards almost suggest the opposite. They seem to hint that life may have been creating space for something that actually matches the person you've become, instead of the person you used to be. And that's where the star gently enters the story. Its energy feels incredibly soft, almost like the first deep breath after a long season of holding everything together. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't demand immediate happiness. It simply reminds you that hope doesn't always return all at once. Sometimes, it comes back quietly, through tiny moments that almost seem ordinary. Catching yourself smiling for no reason, feeling excited about tomorrow again, trusting your own choices without asking everyone else what they think. Looking in the mirror and noticing that you're becoming someone you genuinely enjoy spending time with. That kind of healing isn't always visible from the outside. People may still see the same Taurus they've always known. They may not realize how much has changed beneath the surface. Perhaps that's exactly how it's meant to be. The most meaningful transformations often happen so gently that they don't ask for applause. They simply become part of who you are. It feels like your relationship with yourself is becoming stronger than your need for outside validation, and that changes everything. The opportunities you notice, the people you welcome into your life, even the way you respond to uncertainty, may all begin to reflect this quieter confidence growing inside you. There's another layer unfolding beneath these cards, though. It carries the feeling that this renewed sense of self isn't the destination. It's preparing your heart to recognize something beautiful when it finally arrives, and the next cards seem eager to reveal exactly what that might look like. It feels like the atmosphere around these cards is becoming lighter, Taurus. Not because every question has already been answered, but because your heart may finally be creating enough space for something new to enter. For so long, so much of your energy may have been tied up in holding on, figuring things out, or trying to understand why certain chapters unfolded the way they did. These cards seem to suggest that life no longer wants all of your attention focused on what has already happened. Instead, it quietly invites you to notice what is beginning to arrive. Temperance appears first, and the energy is incredibly gentle. There is no urgency here. No pressure to rush toward the next milestone. It almost feels like life has found a softer rhythm for you. Perhaps you've started realizing that not everything has to happen all at once. Some of the most meaningful blessings don't arrive with dramatic announcements. They simply become part of your daily life before you even recognize how much they have changed you. Yeah, that's the feeling I'm getting. You may wake up one morning and notice that you're laughing more easily. You may find yourself saying yes to opportunities you once would have avoided. You may even discover that the things which used to trigger fear no longer have the same power over you. Those small moments can seem ordinary, yet together, they quietly reshape an entire season of your life. Temperance almost feels like someone gently placing everything back into balance. Not forcing anything, not taking shortcuts, simply allowing every piece to settle where it naturally belongs. There's also something interesting surrounding your relationships, whether this speaks about love, friendship, or even an unexpected connection. The energy feels refreshingly uncomplicated. Someone may cross your path without games, without confusion, without making you question your worth. Or perhaps an opportunity arrives that feels strangely peaceful instead of stressful. Taurus, you spend so much time expecting yourself to work hard for everything that receiving something naturally may almost feel unfamiliar. Okay, let yourself notice that feeling. Sometimes ease isn't a sign that something lacks value. Sometimes ease is exactly what you've been preparing for. The Ace of Cups enters the reading like the first drop of rain after a long dry season. There is an openness here that feels deeply personal. Perhaps your heart is becoming willing to experience joy without immediately wondering how long it will last. Perhaps you're allowing yourself to become excited again without expecting disappointment to follow close behind. That kind of openness is incredibly brave. People often think courage looks loud. Sometimes courage simply looks like choosing to trust life one more time. If someone new enters your world, these cards seem less interested in dramatic romance and more interested in emotional safety. Someone whose presence feels calm instead of confusing. Someone you don't feel the need to perform for. Or perhaps this Ace of Cups isn't only about another person at all. It may be about falling back in love with your own life, rediscovering passions that had quietly faded into the background, finding joy in ordinary afternoons, feeling inspired by possibilities you hadn't considered before. Oh my God. What a beautiful shift that would be. Because once your heart remembers how to receive happiness, it begins recognizing opportunities that were always nearby. The wheel of fortune begins turning almost effortlessly within this spread, and it creates the feeling that timing itself is changing. Not overnight, not in some unbelievable way, more like little doors opening, where walls once seemed permanent. A conversation leads somewhere unexpected. A decision you've been delaying suddenly feels obvious. an invitation appears just when you've stopped trying to force one. Life has a fascinating way of doing that. Sometimes, the moment you stop chasing every answer is the moment answers begin finding you. You may even look back months from now and realize that several meaningful changes all started during the same quiet season. None of them seemed extraordinary by themselves. Yet together, they gently redirected your path. The sun closes this part of the reading with such warm, welcoming energy that it's difficult not to smile. It feels less like reaching the finish line and more like stepping outside after spending far too much time indoors. The light isn't demanding anything from you. It's simply reminding you that you're allowed to enjoy what's good while it's here. There may still be challenges ahead. That's simply part of being human. Yet these cards seem to suggest that your heart is becoming much more capable of meeting life with hope instead of fear. And that alone can change the way every opportunity feels when it finally arrives. Another layer is quietly waiting beyond this one, though. It carries the feeling that these new beginnings aren't meant to remain fragile for long. They're preparing to become something steady, lasting, and deeply rooted in the life you're creating for yourself. There's a quiet confidence growing beneath everything we've been talking about, Taurus. It doesn't feel rushed, and it certainly doesn't feel like something you're trying to prove to the world. Instead, it feels like you're beginning to build a life that actually supports you instead of constantly asking more from you. That's a very different kind of success. It's the kind that lets you breathe a little deeper at the end of the day. The Ace of Pentacles appears with an energy that feels wonderfully grounded. Rather than arriving with loud promises or impossible expectations, it seems to place something real in front of you. Perhaps it's an opportunity connected to work. Perhaps it's a financial improvement that develops gradually. Maybe it's a new project, a conversation that opens an unexpected door, or even a decision you've been hesitant to make finally beginning to feel right. Whatever this represents, it doesn't seem interested in quick victories. It feels much more interested in giving you something that can actually last. Yeah, I really like that feeling. Sometimes we spend so much time chasing extraordinary moments that we overlook the quiet beginnings capable of changing everything. This opportunity may not immediately look life-changing. It may seem almost ordinary at first, yet these cards keep suggesting that ordinary things, cared for consistently, often become the strongest foundations we ever build. The King of Pentacles settles beside the Ace, and together they create an atmosphere of stability that feels incredibly reassuring. Taurus, there is something about your energy here that feels more settled than it has in a long time. You may notice yourself making decisions with less fear and more trust. Not because uncertainty has disappeared, but because your relationship with uncertainty has changed. Instead of asking, "What if everything goes wrong?" you may quietly begin asking, "What kind of life do I truly want to create?" That single shift can influence everything. The way you spend your time, the people you choose to keep close, the dreams you invest your energy in, even the promises you make to yourself. Okay, that's the kind of inner change people don't always recognize from the outside. They may simply notice that you seem calmer, more focused, more difficult to shake. They might not realize that you're no longer making choices just to satisfy other people's expectations. You're beginning to choose what actually feels sustainable for your own heart. The Hierophant brings a beautiful sense of commitment into this reading. Not necessarily commitment only in love, although for some of you, that could certainly become part of the story. This feels larger than that. It feels like committing yourself to a different way of living, a way that honors your values instead of constantly chasing validation, a way that respects your peace as much as your ambition. Perhaps you've spent years believing that happiness had to be earned through constant struggle. These cards seem to offer a gentler possibility. What if stability isn't something you have to fight for forever? What if it's something you slowly create through hundreds of small choices that all move in the same direction? Oh my God, That perspective feels incredibly comforting because it reminds you that every healthy boundary matters, every wise financial decision matters, every moment you choose rest instead of burnout matters, every relationship built on honesty instead of confusion matters. Little by little, those choices begin shaping a completely different future. The Ten of Pentacles completes this part of the spread with such a warm feeling that it's almost impossible not to imagine yourself standing in that future for just a moment. It doesn't seem to be focused on luxury or perfection. It feels much more interested in something deeper, a home that feels peaceful, relationships built on trust, work that supports your life instead of consuming it, financial security that allows you to experience generosity instead of constant worry, a sense of belonging that no longer depends on outside approval. For some Taurus viewers, this may also speak about family, whether that's the one you were born into or the one you're slowly creating around yourself, the people who celebrate your growth instead of fearing it, the ones who make life feel lighter simply because they're part of it. It feels like you're learning that lasting happiness is rarely built through one extraordinary moment. More often, it's created through quiet consistency, through patience, through believing that every small step still counts, even when no one else is watching. There's a peaceful momentum flowing through these cards, and it seems to be carrying you toward something even more meaningful. Because after building a stronger foundation beneath your feet, the journey begins inviting you to see just how completely your world may be opening into a brand new chapter. Something about this final group of cards feels wonderfully expansive, Taurus, not because they promise a perfect life, but because they seem to invite you into a life that finally feels like it belongs to you. There is a difference between simply moving forward and truly arriving somewhere that feels like home within yourself. These cards carry that second feeling. It's quiet, it's steady, and somehow it feels deeply earned. The world appears with a sense of completion that doesn't ask you to look backward with regret. Instead, it gently encourages you to appreciate every version of yourself that made it possible to reach this moment. The person who struggled, the person who doubted, the person who waited, the person who kept going even when no one else understood what they were carrying. They all brought you here. Yeah. Sometimes we spend so much time wishing we could erase difficult chapters that we forget they also shaped our greatest strengths. As I look at the world, it feels like you're beginning to recognize that your life doesn't have to resemble anyone else's timeline. Perhaps you've compared yourself to people who seem to have everything figured out. Perhaps you've wondered why your journey felt slower or more complicated. These cards seem to smile at those questions. They almost whisper that your path was never meant to be rushed because it was preparing you for something that required a stronger foundation than you realized. There is also a beautiful sense of freedom here. Freedom from believing you're behind. Freedom from carrying expectations that were never truly yours. Freedom to create a life that reflects what genuinely brings you peace instead of what simply looks successful from the outside. The Ten of Cups brings an incredibly warm energy into the reading. It feels less like chasing happiness and more like allowing yourself to recognize it when it quietly appears. Happiness may not arrive through one extraordinary event. It may begin with peaceful mornings that no longer feel heavy, conversations where you don't feel the need to explain yourself, relationships where your heart can finally rest instead of constantly wondering where you stand. Perhaps this card speaks about family for some of you. Perhaps it speaks about love. Perhaps it speaks about friendships that become chosen family over time. Whatever form it takes, there is a feeling of emotional belonging that seems to grow naturally from everything you've already experienced. Okay, that's something truly beautiful, because when you stop searching for people to complete you, you often become much more capable of recognizing those who simply walk beside you. The Empress enters the reading, almost like a gentle reminder that life continues responding to the care you give yourself. There is something incredibly nurturing about this energy. It feels like abundance that's allowed to grow patiently instead of being forced. You may notice yourself becoming more creative, more inspired, more willing to invest your energy into things that genuinely nourish your spirit rather than simply keeping you busy. For some Taurus viewers, this may even be a season where ideas begin flourishing. A new hobby, a meaningful project, a healthier relationship with your body, a deeper appreciation for your home. Small acts of self-care that gradually transform the atmosphere of your everyday life. Oh my God! Sometimes healing looks far less dramatic than we imagine. Sometimes healing is cooking yourself a good meal, answering your own needs with kindness, laughing without feeling guilty, trusting that rest has value too. Those simple moments slowly become the life you've been hoping to create. And finally, the star returns, almost as if it wanted to close this reading with the same quiet hope that has been growing beneath every card from the very beginning. It doesn't ask you to have every answer. It doesn't expect you to know every step ahead. It simply reminds you that hope becomes much easier to carry once you stop placing it entirely outside yourself. There may still be unexpected turns ahead. That's simply part of every human journey. Yet it feels like you'll meet those moments differently than you once did, with more patience, more trust, more compassion toward yourself. You may even discover that the peace you've been searching for was never waiting at the end of the road. It was slowly growing inside you while you kept moving forward, one quiet step at a time. If this reading found you during a season of change, perhaps let these cards remain a gentle reminder that not every transformation needs to happen all at once. Some of the most meaningful ones unfold so naturally that one day you simply look around and realize you're living a life that once felt impossible to imagine. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, Taurus. If this reading resonated with your heart, I'd truly love to hear which card or message stayed with you the longest. Your stories always bring so much warmth to this community. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me again for our next reading. Until then, take gentle care of yourself. Taurus, you matter more than you know, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.